Hey logical people, at the end of this tutorial, you will know everything in detail how to host your app using Nginx as a reverse proxy. You will understand everything in detail how a server works using AWS, how the routing works, how the port works, how different application works, how DNS server works, everything in one tutorial. I kid you not, this tutorial is packed with practical knowledge. You cannot afford to miss this. Make sure you watch this tutorial till the end. Hey logical people, GKB here. I just wanted to emphasize on the learning methodology. So as you know, we always follow this methodology where we learn by doing things rather than mugging up the concepts, okay? So before we move into the tutorial, there are a couple of things that I assume as a prerequisites that you already have in place. Number one is you know how to publish a Git repository on GitHub, and you already have created a free AWS account. Now let's see what our learning objectives are for this tutorial. So number one, we're going to spin up a new EC2 machine. We're going to install dependencies on that machine. We will set up the inbound and outbound rules. We're going to also set up a GitHub on EC2. We will create jobs or services to host your app. At the end, we're going to launch and test the app. Okay. I hope you're excited because I am super pumped up. Beautiful. So I'm back to my Visual Studio Code. So this is where I left you in the last tutorial. And we're going to use this exact app and we're going to host this on a new machine on AWS. So let's get to it. So before we do that, I'm going to open my favorite tool, as you might know, that's MS Paint. And before we go into the nitty-gritties of how things work and how do we set up different machines, different architectures, it is important to understand this fundamental concept of computer networks. So let's try and understand that, okay? If you are 100% sure of all the networking that goes behind hosting an app, you can by all means skip this section and jump to the next section. Okay, with that, let's start. So imagine this is you. This is you sitting somewhere in the world with your laptop, okay? And you want to access a website, yeah? In order to understand the web hosting, we need to understand how request travels from your laptop to a server and then bounce back. So what happens is, the moment you type www.xyz.com, a request starts from your server, goes to your ISP, which is Internet Service Provider. Your ISP resolves the DNS, and once the DNS is resolved, your request is sent to a machine somewhere on the internet. So if this is internet, and this machine has an IP address of 1.168, something like this, okay? So just a quick recap, what happens? You're sitting with your laptop at your home, you open www.xyz.com, the request goes to your ISP then resolves that request via DNS table, and once it resolves the request via DNS table, it gets an IP address, and once that IP address is resolved, your request is sent to that particular IP address, and that IP address could be 12.4.56.83, something like that, okay? So that's first thing first that we need to understand. Now your request is sent to this IP address, and then this IP address returns the data to your DNS, and then DNS returns the data to ISP, and then ISP returns the data back to your laptop. So that is the flow. So 1, 2, and 3. The way we're going to design our machine on AWS will work almost like this. However, there will not be any DNS. So what will happen is we will send a request from your laptop to this IP address directly, of course via ISP. So ISP is always there. There's no DNS resolving because we are not typing xyz.com. We're going to do that in a different lecture if you're interested. So you're going to send a request to ISP. ISP will send the same request to this IP address, and then this machine will return something, and that return data will be sent to you like that. So that's concept number one. Okay. There's another concept that we need to look what's happening inside the machine. So assuming this is your IP address, 10.19.28. It really doesn't matter. It could be anything. Okay. Assuming this is your IP address, and your request has arrived here, but it doesn't know how to get inside this system. It really does not know how to talk to this machine. And to talk to this machine, what we need applications. For example, I'm going to just design a couple of applications like this. Okay. Now this could be, for example, HTTP server. We're going to do this together using Nginx. So whenever a request comes to a server, it needs to know to which application does this request needs to go. Does it need to go HTTP server? Does it need to go to Internet Explorer? Does it need to go to app 2? Does it need to go to app 1? And how do we resolve this? Well, we resolve this by something called ports. So what happens, every application is running on some port. So this HTTP server runs on port number 80. This could be running on port number 30. App 2 could be running on port number 3000, and so on. This could be running on 8000. And you have already seen this. Where have you seen this? If you go back to your Visual Studio, and if you look at your console, whenever you type npm run dev, it opens a new port 3000. So this localhost app is running on port number 3000. And this is where it gets interesting, because to talk to any server, you need technically two things. Number one is you need the IP address. So that's the number one, so that you know where to reach. And number two is the port. This machine within the pool of machine, which is internet. So that's first thing first. So with the IP address, you identify the machine. And with the port, you identify within that machine to which application do I want to talk to. Okay. So let's keep these two topics in mind. Number one, again, I just want to emphasize because this is so critical. Number one is you need to know which city to go, which is basically the IP address. And then you need to know the port, because you need to know which application to talk to. Okay, perfect. With that, let's go and design our servers. If I can quickly go back to our learning objectives, let's try and spin up a new EC2 machine. Okay. So if you go to AWS and type EC2, click on the first option that comes up. And within EC2, there's this orange button called Launch Instance. Click on that. Give your instance any name. So I'm going to say test app 1, like that. Then I'm going to select Ubuntu, because we are talking about Ubuntu tutorial. You can also select Windows, Red Hat, and whatnot. So these all are free tier eligible. So technically 750 hours free every month. So it's free for a year. The second important thing is key pair login. So if you have a key pair with you, you can use that. So for example, I have these 3 keys. I could use that. But if you're doing this the first time, you can also create a new key pair. I would say new test app 1 key. And I'm going to use putty to log in to this machine. So I'm going to just say ppk. Okay. I'm going to click on create key pair. It's going to download the key pair. We're going to keep it for a while. So we're going to keep everything as it is. And we're going to click on launch instance. What it will do is it will spin up a new server for you, and it will assign a unique IP address to that machine, which basically means think about it as a new computer being released in the internet, and its IP address is unique. And with that IP address, you can uniquely identify that instance. That's all it is. Okay. So I'm going to come back once everything is done. Beautiful. So our app is running. When you select the app, you will see you get a lot of options at the bottom. And in the details section, you have this public IP address. Copy that and open your putty. Within the putty, you can paste that IP address here. And before clicking on open, you need to tell the putty that you are authorized to use this. And to give the authentication, we're going to browse for the key we just downloaded. Excuse me. So we're going to browse for the key that we just downloaded. Click on open. And before clicking on open, go to session again and give it a name. So I'm going to say test app. And save it, so that next time you want to open this machine, you don't have to do everything again. Okay. So select test app and click on open. Click on accept, and then log in as Ubuntu user, like that. So I'm going to change the font size so that you're able to see it better. Just because because I care. Yeah, I think this should be good. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to say sudo. So this is the sudo is the command as a super user, and then we're gonna say apt install node.js, like that. If you see an error like this, what you need to do, you need to update the apt-get. So the way to do that is like this. So everything is updated. I'm gonna run the command again, sudo apt install node.js. Let's say yes and press enter. Once we have installed Node, we also want to install npm, so Node Package Manager. Just say yes and go. When you see any such window, just let the default thing there and press enter. Beautiful. So now we have npm installed and we have NEXTJS installed. Now let's create a new project using npm. So if you don't know what this command is, how it works, please go and visit the tutorial I created. But it's asking, do you want to proceed? I'll say yes. Now it's going to ask for project name. I'm going to say test app. And it's going to install all the dependencies. So I'm going to come back once everything is done. Beautiful. So our app is installed. Let's go to that folder. And we will say npm run dev. You have seen all this many times, so you should know what this means. Now let's go back to the browser and open our IP address. Make sure, and I cannot emphasize this enough, make sure you always type HTTP and not HTTPS. Otherwise, it's going to take a lot of time to debug why it's not working. So, although we have typed HTTP and we have used the correct IP address, this will not work. And it will say that timeout error, it's not able to find, it's not able to connect to the server. And the problem is, I'm going to stop this server. The problem is this. You are able to send a request. I'm going to take a new color. You're able to send a new request, which is okay. This color doesn't look good. So you're able to send a new request, which is okay. It goes to ISP. Then from here, it finds your machine, which is okay. But the moment it reaches here, it doesn't know what to do, because now if we go back to our zoomed in version of the app, so your request is standing here and it doesn't know where to go. There is no application running inside your machine that can talk to that service. So let's install Nginx, and that should be able to resolve that problem. Okay. So we'll go here. We will say sudo apt install Nginx, like that. Yes. If you don't know what Nginx is, we can go here and type Nginx, and you will see that Nginx is a web server that can be used as a reverse proxy, load balancer, and much more. We're going to use it as a reverse proxy here. Okay. And now let's check if Nginx is running. So you say sudo system control status of what? Of Nginx service. So you see that it's active and running. Now if I go here and refresh the page, we are still not able to reach to the server. What is the problem? Now if we go back to our awesome diagram, we have done everything. So if I take a green color, we have a server that is running on port 80, and we are able to reach to this machine, and now we should be able to talk to this application, right? But for some reason we are not, and that reason is the security reason. So AWS by default does not open that port. So your machine basically has a lock on the door, and you need to unlock that door so that people can get inside your door. How do we do that? Go back to AWS, select your app, go to securities, click on this security group, and here click on edit inbound rules. As you can see, there's only one security added, which is SSH, which means that we can do SSH via PuTTY. What we want to do, we want to add new rule. This needs to be HTTP, like that, on port 80, and this should be coming from anywhere. Save the rules. Okay, let's go and refresh the page. And now you see welcome from Nginx. Isn't that amazingly beautiful, right? Now you might be wondering that in this image, I showed you that Nginx is running on port 80, but we are not saying that do this. The reason that we don't do :port 80 is because when you do not do :port number, by default the request goes to port 80. So that's how it works. Beautiful. So let's go and check our learning objectives super quickly. So we have spinned up a new EC2 machine. We have installed the dependencies. We have set up the inbound and outbound rules. Now let's see how we can host our app on it. So right now we are seeing the default Nginx page, but we want to see our app on the server. How do we do that? Let's see. So for that, we again need to understand how Nginx works. So I'm going to open my favorite tool again. You know what that tool is. It's MS Paint. So here it is. This is how Nginx works. Everything is our Nginx. Nginx has two buckets. It has a lot of buckets, but two are the important ones. So the number one is site available, and the other one is site enabled. What this means is we can put a lot of sites in the available folder, and then what we do, is we link that available folder back to the enabled folder. And once that happens, Nginx is able to serve our web page via the back proxy. So how that works, what we're going to do, we're going to create a new file and we're going to say testapp.conf. And this will contain all the details that Nginx needs to know to show our app. And then we're going to link it here and we're going to say testapp.conf like that. We're going to link this file here. And now what will happen is at port 80, a request will come. Nginx will listen to it and it will see does it needs to go to testapp.conf. You can actually have multiple files here. You could have app2.conf and like that. And Nginx will decide which application this request needs to be directed basically. So we're going to configure only one, and this should be default one. So all our requests will be redirected to this configuration. This is obviously linked to the configuration that we're going to create. And this configuration will eventually, what it will do, it will talk to our app like this. So if I create a bigger box, and the bigger box is basically, if I can color it a little bit differently. So the bigger box is basically Ubuntu, right? And the smaller box in Nginx, that is already understood. And within Ubuntu, we have our own localhost running, localhost 3000. And what we will say in this configuration file, we will say, hey, whenever you receive a request on port 80, figure out which configuration file it needs to be redirected. Once you figure out, it will be the file that I created. And once the request comes to this file, we're going to again point it back to localhost 3000. And then localhost 3000 will take care of that request. And that's the whole flow in Nginx. I hope you understand this because this is paramount. And you literally need to understand this because in future, if you want to host any app, it doesn't have to be NEXTJS. It could be Python app. It could be anything. This configuration, this format never changes. Okay. So this is the holy grail of hosting your app. Okay. So let's see how we can do this. So we know that we can say something like this, and then npm run dev, and this will spin up a new server. So this is sorted. We already have this part. What we are missing is technically this and that. So let's first create this one. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go to a special file. We will say cd etc nginx sites available like that. You see there's nothing here. It's just default. So we will say sudo vi. We're going to open a vi editor. And now the file name is up to you. So I'm going to say my app.conf like that. I'm going to press I so that I enable the insert mode. I'm going to copy the command and I'm going to walk you through with it. So what we are saying is create a server. So this is a configuration. We're saying listen to port 80 or port 80 in any other way and respond to that request whenever that request coming from a particular server. So let's update that. This is not the correct IP address. We need to find our IP address. And how do we do that? I'm going to go back to AWS, go to EC2, go to running instance, select your app, and you should find your public IP address. Copy that. Go back to putty and paste it like this. So we are saying, hey, listen to port 80 or colon 80, whatever. Both are same things. If the request is coming from this server, whatever request was coming, please send it to HTTP localhost like this. So I'm going to save this file. To save, I press escape, colon wx, and I press enter. If I go back to our file again, we just created this. Now we need to create a link between sites available and sites enabled. So let's do that. We're going to say sudo ln, we'll say etc nginx sites available myapp.conf, link it to etc sites enabled like this. Press enter. Now let's test everything if everything is working the way it should. So we'll say sudo nginx -t. And you should see something like this. Syntax is okay and test is successful. If you see these two things, you have done everything correctly. If not, there will be an error here and it will also point you in which log file to look. But if you have been following me, you should get this. Okay, perfect. Now we're going to restart the Nginx. So we'll say sudo systemctl restart. What do we want to restart? We want to restart Nginx services like that. And then I'm going to press cd and I'm going to go back to our app. I'll say npm run dev like that. Now if we go back and if I refresh the page, we should be able to see something like this. Amazing, right? How beautiful it is, right? You are doing everything from the starting and now you're able to see your own app running on an IP address. Beautiful. So let's go back to our learning objectives super quick. We're going to set up our GitHub in a while. Now let's have a look. How can we create jobs to host our app? Now the problem with the current architecture is that we always have to go and do npm run dev, which is not the best way of doing it. The best way of running your apps would be doing something like this. The way we restart Nginx. Similarly, the system should be able to restart our app. How do we do that? So it turns out it's not too difficult. So let's try and do that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna say sudo what my app dot service like this. I'm gonna press I to enable insert mode, paste something, and then I'm gonna explain what's happening. We are saying that just give a description. So we will say this, everything is okay, user is Ubuntu, we know that. And now we need the working directory. If I remember correctly, the name, it was test_app. And we want a particular command that needs to be executed whenever this service file is called, and that should be npm run dev. You can also use start. For time being, let's go for npm run dev. So I'm gonna save this file. So I just want to do pwd so that I know that we have used the correct path. So I'm gonna copy this. I'm gonna open the file one more time, and I'm just gonna paste it here because I'm a little paranoid that the path might not be correct. Perfect. Now what we do, so now if we go back to our IP address and if we refresh, we should get an error because Nginx is saying, hey, I'm trying to reach to that application, but I'm not getting any response. So what is happening here is if I take a red color, you sent a request, it went here. From here, it went here. And when it tries to reach here, it says, hey, I'm not able to find anything. And therefore, I'm going to return an error. So that's why I get 502. How do we fix it? Super simple. We're going to say sudo system control restart, or you can also say start dot service like that. You could also say something like this, but both are same things. And once you do that, what it does is in the background, it started that localhost server. Now if I go refresh here, voila, we see our app running. Beautiful, right? There's one more learning objective that I really want to cover, because honestly speaking, you would not like to just see the default app. You would like to see an app that you have built, right? So let's go and see how we can set up GitHub. And before we do that, if you learn something today, if you learn something meaningful, I would request that you go and hit that like button, share the video, and give me some comments like what did you learn, what did you like, and things like that. Nevertheless, moving ahead, going back here. We have a couple of files here, and what I want to do is I want to delete everything that is here. And the best way would be that I just delete this folder and create a new folder. Okay. And before we do that, I'm just gonna say, if I can start, I can also say stop. I'm gonna say cd dot dot. I'm back. There's the folder. I'm gonna say sudo remove -r, like remove everything. Test app. Then I'm gonna say mkdir test_app. I'm gonna create this folder again. The reason I'm creating this folder again is because the system control is gonna look for this folder to run the app. So if you're willing to change the service file, you don't have to delete it anyway. So I'm gonna just go into that folder like that. There's nothing there. I'm gonna say git init. I'm gonna initialize an empty git. Once I do that, now this folder is git enabled. What I want to do is I need to find a git repository from where I want to download everything. Okay. This is the git repository from where I want to download all the data. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this link, right? Go back to Ubuntu. So I'm gonna say git remote add origin, and now I'm gonna paste the URL of the git repository like that. Now technically we are done. I can just say git pull and I will get all the data. However, your repository could be private, and if you have a private repository, what you want to do is you want to provide another command which will look something like this. And if I can explain this super quickly, what you need to do is you need to say git remote set URL origin http, and then you need a git token. I will provide the link of how you get the git token. You will say git token @github.com, and then you can technically copy this and paste it here, and then you're all set. But since our repository is public, we don't need to do this. I'm gonna just delete this line. Now I'm gonna say git pull origin main like that. Now if I say ls, I've got all the files that I needed in order to run my app. So if I go here and say npm run dev, it will not work because, as you might have noticed, there is no node underscore modules file. And to do that, it's super simple. I'm going to say npm I. It's going to install every dependency that I need. Sometimes it might hang here, so your machine might not respond. That could be because since it's a very small machine, it's a tier 1 machine, it's too much processing for it. What you can do is you can kill all other services and try again, and that should work. Okay, perfect. So now we have everything here. If I go back to my machine, if I refresh, I should get 502, because just want to remind you again that this is not available right now. How do we start that? Well, that's super simple. We have created a service, right? So sudo, you can say start my app, or you can say restart, whatever. Now if I go here and refresh, I should see the app that I have created. Isn't that beautiful? You can literally give this URL to one of your friends, and they can just, so for example, if I go here, open it in a private incognito mode, I just paste it, and it should work. Isn't this beautiful? I just love it. If you're wondering that this looks like a little bit of tedious work, like why would I need to remember the IP address? I agree, this is tedious, and the best way to resolve this is by resolving two things. So if I go back to our first image, you know what? First, I want to show you something. If I open a command prompt and I go here and I say ping google.com, you should see that even if it's saying ping google.com, it's trying to reach to an IP address, right? Which technically means what I just showed you here is that whenever I say google.com, I'm going to take a different color and I hope you're able to see it. Whenever I say google.com, it goes to ISV, it goes to a DNS server, it resolves the meaning of google.com into one of these IP address, and then within the internet where there are millions and millions of websites, it goes and find google.com like that, and then it returns data from here to your DNS, to ISP, and then to you. So in order for your website to be able to look a little bit beautiful, instead of saying 3.121 blah blah blah, you could say myawesomeapp.com. You need to buy a domain name, and you need to be able to configure Nginx so that it's able to listen to this particular website. And we're going to cover that in the next tutorial, so stay connected.